One of the things I say in my book is something to the tune of, in being away so often, my partner taught me that I could do without him. If you need someone to convince you to get divorced, don't get one. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And don't look, I'm not going to be the poster child for divorce. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? That was when this book was launched. I find that oftentimes women and men actually, they almost feel like they need permission, to make this sort of a decision. And they're looking for someone that will give them permission. And they're hoping it'll be me because I've gone through divorce myself. And I always make it very clear that that's not my mission in life. I'm pro-marriage. You know what I mean? I am pro-marriage. Again, I don't look at divorce as something that happened to me. I made a choice. Do you understand? Maybe it doesn't matter so much who instigated it or who, but the point was I made a choice about how I no longer wanted to live. You know what I mean? So for anyone to judge me for that or to, I'm sorry, that's your problem.
I agree. I fully agree.
As wonderful as marriage is, it's not marriage itself that ensures your children are going to be okay. It is marriage without turbulence.
That is so powerful.
It's better for a child to be in a marriage.
Life is messy, beautiful, complicated. We juggle family, work, love, and its expectations. But sometimes we just need to talk about it out loud. This is that space. A place to laugh at the chaos, honor the challenges, and celebrate the wins, both big and small. Where stories are shared, hearts are open, and no one is pretending. Authenticity is welcome here. So pour your tea and join me because there's a space and a seat here for every version of you. This is Conversations with Kũi. Hello, and welcome back to Conversations with Kũi, a safe space for hard truths and radical vulnerability, where we talk about the lives that we're actually living, not only the lives that we were taught to want. I'm your host, Dr. Kũi Mũraya, and today we are talking about navigating divorce as an African Christian woman. A very important topic, but that is rarely discussed in the mainstream. What do you do when the life that you had planned or the life that you thought you would live with someone comes crumbling down? How do you navigate that? When there are children, what do you do about that? And with me today is one of my dearest friends, Chichi, who will not only help us unpack through this topic, but has navigated the path of divorce as an African woman of faith herself. In addition to that, Chichi has written a wonderful, wonderful book that I highly recommend. The book is called Strange Women and Other Strangleholds, and I'll hold it up for those of us who'll be watching on YouTube. I've read this book myself from cover to cover. It's deeply thoughtful. It's very reflective. It is full of wisdom. And I also really like the writing style. And I'm not just saying this because I'm biased because she's a good friend of mine. It is the truth. It is written very well with short, digestible chapters. And that is just, it's a book that I recommend not only for people who might be navigating issues to do with separation and divorce, but for anyone who is in a marriage or anyone who is thinking about getting into marriage. This book is full of wisdom and I highly recommend it. And we will make sure that the information on how to access the book is in the podcast description. Welcome, Chichi.
Thank you.
So delighted to have you on the podcast.
I am thrilled to be here.
Yes. And this has been a long time coming.
It really has. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. And I should also tell my audience that Chichi actually gave me the name for this podcast. I don't know if she remembers this.
I remember slightly, yes.
Yes. And I will tell the audience the backstory because previously this podcast would have been the two of us co-hosting the podcast. And she even had a name for us. It was going to be East Meets West, if you remember.
Yes, I do remember.
Because I'm East African, she's West African. And it just started randomly over lunch one day, and we're talking and talking as we always do. And then I think we both said, we should talk about these things on a podcast. And I got really excited about it. And I'm like, Chichi, let's do this thing. And then my dear friend bailed on me.
Yeah.
But even though she bailed on me, and this was long before I even started thinking of making this a true reality. But even though she bailed on me, she suggested a name for me. She said, yeah, why don't you do it on your own? And you can call it Conversations with Kũi. So when my producer Lolo and I were thinking about names for this podcast, I told her about this name and we both loved it. And we both felt this is the right name for the podcast. So I guess, Chichi, you will always be an integral part of the podcast because you named it.
Absolutely.
So thank you.
I'm so glad to see you've pushed it this far.
Thank you.
Great to be here.
Thank you. Before we get into it, I want you to tell our guests a little bit about yourself and then we'll get into the topic of today.
Sure. What would you like to hear?
Whatever you, in the context of today, whatever you want to tell our guests.
So my name is Chichi. I am an NGO professional. I am an accidental writer as well. I fell into writing sort of by necessity due to some, events that took place in my life. And that culminated in the book that Kũi is talking about. I'm a mother of 2 delightful children. I've lived in Nairobi for 21 years. And I think that's about it. But feel free to probe.
I will probe. Don't worry. We're only just beginning, Chichi. Yeah. I told you, we're gisting. As a Kenyan, I learned this word that Nigerians use when you're like talking with your friend and sharing stories. Yeah, it's called gisting. So every time I'm trying to plan a catch up with Chichi, I'm like, when are we doing our next gist? When are we gisting next? So we're gisting today and I will probe you as part of our gist.
Okay.
I want to get straight into it, Chichi. So in one of our previous conversations, you have said to me that back in the day or at some point in your life, there was a particular naivety that you had, which led to a series of decisions that then resulted in you being a divorced woman today. Tell me about that. I think you said there was both naivety and strength. Let's start with the naivety bit and then we'll go to the strengths.
Sure. Guess I have to be careful about what I say to you in private.
It's your story.
No, I'm just kidding.
Yes.
No, the truth is, I look back and I consider myself as having been very naive for most of my life. I think the tide began to turn. It didn't begin to turn until probably my 40s, I would say I lived a pretty innocent life for most of the decades that I can remember, honestly. I also became a person of faith really early, I think that that's an asset. I still think so. I think that also depending on the kinds of teachings you're exposed to, it does also create a sort of a bubble. There's something protective about that. And at the same time, there could be certain things about that don't necessarily prepare you for the harsh realities of life. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. My personality is just one that's quite open, naturally, and that really embraces people naturally and doesn't put up, the barriers that one would typically expect, when you meet a person. So the idea of having any kind of, reservation about people, about situations, the idea of having your guard up was very alien to me. Mm-hmm. So I'm really lucky that I've come through these 5 decades relatively unscathed. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think that's sort of what I meant in that everyone was welcome into my life. Mm-hmm. Ideas about, judging people or exercising restraint, in your when it comes to, welcoming people and all that, that was very foreign to me. I don't think it was a terrible thing. I'm just not, exactly the same as I used to be. I have a lot more sort of reservation when it comes to I sort of test people out first. Mm-hmm. This is something that I didn't used to do before. I think I've almost thought that there was something wrong with being cautious, and that people really need to be accepted at face value. and so on and so forth. It's a wonder that I didn't get into a lot of trouble with that sort of personality, that level of naivete. I could have really been taken advantage of, but I see that I escaped many different situations. Call it God's grace. So I guess that's what I meant. And so in the process of sort of being that way, it took me a really long time to really wake up to the realities of my life, the realities of my marriage, and to really begin to ask myself whether I was living the kind of life that I actually wanted to, Yeah.
And that's a powerful question to ask yourself, whether you're living the kind of life that you really want to.
Yeah, I think that a lot of times we're on autopilot. Yeah,
you're right.
It's like you're just living, doing what you're supposed to do.
Surviving.
Paying your bills, raising your children, doing this, going from milestone to milestone and not really pausing to think, what does this mean for me? Is this... We only have one life. Is this the way I want to use it? Am I really being a good steward of my own life? You know what I mean? I think it's hard to be a good steward if you don't realize you're a steward in the first place. A steward takes stock and takes responsibility, faces the truth, pivots where necessary, this, that, and the other. And I feel like I wasn't really doing that for a really long time. And I think it's just very human not to. Yeah.
Okay. And so was there a particular point specifically in terms of your marriage when you had that wake up call, like maybe things need to change? Or was it a gradual thing, or was it something happened? It was a lifestyle.
It was a combination of the two. I think over life, there are many signposts along the way, right? As you're journeying. Sometimes they make an impression on you. Sometimes they don't. You file them in the back of your memory. They come up again when you get to the next signpost. You know what I mean? And sometimes it takes, one maybe critical incident that makes you say, wow, I remember all the signposts I saw along the way that I should have paid attention to, and that I didn't. And for the details of that, I would say, I wrote a whole book about it. People can go ahead and read it if they would like. I could use the time here to talk about it. I'm a little bit reluctant to do that because in many ways in every way, I am well beyond, the point I was at when those things occurred and where there was trauma. And I really had this need to unleash that trauma in order to bring myself to a better place. But just to say that maybe one of the interesting things is that I didn't, in the grand scheme of things, when it comes to Nigerian marriages, I did not have a horrible marriage. That's actually the interesting thing, right? And some, again, in the grand scheme of things, when it comes to what the general society sort of expects, I don't think people would look into my marriage and say, that was really horrible. You need to pack it. No. We were two decent individuals who had the best of intentions, and for whom things didn't go as well as expected. And unfortunately, I was one of the people involved in this. I say unfortunately because when I begin to tell myself the truth, it's hard for me to deny it, And so it's hard for me to sweep things under the carpet sometimes. I might do it for a while. I can't do it forever, And so I think unlike the typical Nigerian woman, who for a variety of very good reasons would have made different decisions from myself, I had to make decisions that would allow me to breathe, and would allow me to feel like I was doing the best I could for myself and living a life that I could be at peace with. Yeah.
Were you scared to make that decision? Because it's a big thing. And by then you already had 2 children by then.
I did. Yeah. And by the time my divorce was, by the time the decision was made, by the time I knew that this was going to happen, I think my youngest was 1 and had just begun to walk. So yes, it was a very vulnerable stage, and there was a lot of apprehension. And I will say that this is why it took 4 years. You know what I mean? It took, so from the time I decided this is what was going to happen, this is what was probably going to happen, right? To the time I actually filed for divorce, that was probably a 3.5 year period. And then it took 6 months for the divorce to be final. So it takes a while. And one of the things I talk about is that it could take forever. And even if it does at the end, your decision may not be mine, and that's okay. We all need to make decisions that we can live with and that we feel are right for us. Because at the end of the day, no matter what advice people give and what hopes people have, you have to live with yourself, and you will. You know, everybody else goes home. So it was not a decision that I came to lightly. I took my time. I didn't it wasn't a knee-jerk reaction. And so I needed to turn the issue over in my mind, like leave no stone unturned, till I got to a point where I knew that if I made this decision, I would be fine and there would be no regrets. And when I got to that point, I filed.
And it's interesting you're saying that, because I do know, I can think of 2 people in my circle who, you know, also one of them at some point said to me, you know, I've looked at my future and I do not see this person in it with me. But then from the point she said that to me to the point when she actually filed for divorce, it was quite a few years also. So as you're saying, I think sometimes people might think, oh, it was a rash decision or it was a quick decision. But I think for many people, it's like, you know, over time, it's something you've thought about, you've taken time to really think about the pros and cons, and then, you know, finally come to that decision.
I think so. And I think oftentimes, if we're truthful, you know, we see divorce as something that's on paper. You know, you're divorced because you have the divorce certificate. Oftentimes you've lived as a divorced person for many years, and the only person that knew was you. You know, and so what the outside world sees is oftentimes a accumulation of many years of having lived in that state, you know, until you realize that actually this has really been my life. You know what I mean? If you take away the smoke screen, this has been my life. And so it's not going to be a whole lot different, you know? Yeah. So it's a lot of introspection.
So Chichi, I'm curious about, you know, how, as you're rightly saying, there's that period of time, not just for you, I think for many women, or maybe men even, where you're living as a divorced person, but it's only you who knows that. Like, you seem like you're still in a marriage. I'm curious to know, what is life like at that point?
You know, it's a challenging question. So it's a bit difficult to say because everyone's situation is so different. My situation was certainly different from a lot of married couples that were around me. I was in the sort of marriage where my partner was rarely there.
Okay.
Right? So we weren't living in the same country. His business would take him away for most of the year. So there was that aspect of being alone, because physically you are alone most of the time. And then also the other layer of sort of the emotional loneliness and so on and so forth. So that's what it looked like for me. I think that it can be really challenging, you know, when it's challenging when a couple is actually able to, circumstances allow them to live together. It's challenging when circumstances, you know, may demand that they live apart, whether it's different cities or different countries. And when you do come back to live together, there's sort of this whole rearrangement that goes on, you know. And then as you're in the midst of trying to rearrange things to say, okay, we're living like a couple now, the person's gone, you know, and then you have to pick up the pieces and begin again on your own. You know, it's quite disorienting, you know what I mean? And then if it's a situation where the marriage is going downhill, I know that in my case, it became increasingly difficult. I think I got used to my own company, you know, in some ways. And so the disruptions became increasingly difficult to the point that I would sort of even become sort of ill, you know, when that period was over, it's like the pent up stress, as it's leaving your body, it's like you just feel like you're just sick, for a while, So it's a lot more than people think, that's really going on, behind the scenes. Yeah. And, personally, I'm not one to give advice, but I really am one for, if you're going to be in a marriage, I think that as much as possible, it's really good if you can try and go through things together, be together. Yeah. It doesn't always work. I've known some couples who've successfully, lived in separate cities or countries. Mm-hmm. I don't know a lot of them, but there are some, Mm-hmm. So I would really advocate for, sort of being there to go through things together as a unit. Mm-hmm. One of the things I say in my book is something to the tune of, in being away so often, my partner taught me that I could do without him. It was not intentional, but it happened. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that's ironical, isn't it? But, I knew that I would be okay because I had been okay. I'd been on my own for such a long time, Yeah.
So you weren't worried about it?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think oftentimes the trepidation for a lot of women is, what if I get lonely? Mm-hmm. What if I can't pay the bills? What are my children going to do? Will my children miss them? Mm-hmm. They miss their dad or their mom? But if that's been the setup all along, it almost makes it easier, unfortunately. Yeah. So that was my own reality.
And I want us to talk about going through divorce specifically as a woman of faith. And I want to read an extract I told you I've read this book cover to cover and underlined things and I'm not even married or planning
and
to,
it's
but
really. That's great because it's not just for women who've been through divorce. Exactly. Everybody can learn something.
Exactly. So I want to specifically talk about going through this as a woman of faith. And the reason I'm asking about this is because I know there might be women out there who are in very bad situations, but then because of their faith, it adds a whole other complexity.
Yeah.
So in your book, in one of the chapters, on one page, you kind of give, so there's this Bible verse about God hates divorce. Yeah. And then, so you kind of give this Bible verse from different versions, different versions of the Bible, whether it's King James Version, the Living Bible, New International Version. So I'll read what from one of the versions, maybe the New Century Version, and then I'll read your reflection about it. And then I want to talk about that. So you said, or rather, the Bible says, as per New Century Version, the Lord God of Israel says, I hate divorce. And I hate people who do cruel things as easily as they put on clothes, says the Lord all-powerful. So be careful and do not break your trust. And then you go on and give a whole reflection about it. But the passage that really stuck with me is, it's interesting to me that in this particular passage, despite his hatred for divorce, God does not necessarily use this opportunity to ask that his interlocutors refrain from getting divorced. Rather, he uses it to demand that they be faithful and upright. Clearly, this is because such virtues can help keep divorce at bay. The question then becomes, what does God really hate in the context of this scripture? Is it divorce in itself, an end product, or behaviors that can lead to it? Let's talk about that specifically, because, as I said, for many women of faith, Christian women, making that decision to get a divorce if things are really not working might be even more complex. What would you say to them?
I am really big on every human being, female or male, exercising their critical thinking skills. I am huge on that. Mm-hmm. As someone who, as you say, has been a person of faith for a long time, one thing I'm glad about is that for the most part, I never lost my critical thinking skills. And I love to read, I love to analyze, and I carried all that into my reading of religious texts. One thing I find, especially for those of us in Africa, is we take a lot of things out of context. We're so impatient with actually reading and analyzing and comparing. And you know what I mean? It's almost like your culture or your socialization or whatnot comes before any kind of critical thinking. I'm not like that. We're all going to be different, right? And I always like to say, including in the book, I say something along those lines that if you need someone to convince you to get divorced, don't get one. You know what I mean? And don't look, I'm not going to be the poster child for divorce. You know what I mean? That was when this book was launched, you know, one of my apprehensions was that it's almost like people wanted me to be the poster child for divorce. I'm like, I'm not going to be that. I'm living my own life. I made my own decisions. You know what I mean? I'm not creating a doctrine about what should happen if your spouse does X or Y, or if you feel A, B, C, right? We all have to make our own decisions. And I guess all I would say is that in that particular chapter is just an example of using a scripture that has typically been totally stripped of context. Just one verse. I hate divorce, says the Lord. Just that, you know, and we run with it. But I'm like, wait a minute, let's talk about what was said before it. The same person who said it, what did he say before? What did he say after? What was the general context? And I think that's how we need to look at, you know, every piece of scripture. We're way too impatient to do that. And way too eager to be judgmental about what we have not critically even thought through or investigated for ourselves. That's a pet peeve of mine. You know what I mean? And so, because that scripture is often thrown in people's faces, you know, I just felt the need to talk about what I think about it and to give people something else to think about, you know. And I often find that people are sort of like, wow, I never thought of it that way. You know, I think we shouldn't be afraid to investigate even those things we hold dear. Just hold them up to light, right? Don't be too afraid to think, you know, very deeply, you know, to investigate, you know, to compare, you know, one aspect of a religious text to another and say, wait a minute, if you stack these two up together, what does it really mean, you know? So that's my own way of living. It may not appeal to everybody, and I think that's fine. In my journey as a divorced woman, what I find is that oftentimes, people find that compelling, whether it's couples that are going through a tumultuous time or single people that are dating or whatnot. I find that oftentimes women and men actually, they almost feel like they need permission, you know, to make this sort of a decision. And they're looking for someone that will give them permission. And they're hoping it'll be me because I've gone through divorce myself. And I always make it very clear that that's not my mission in life. I'm pro-marriage. You know what I mean? I am pro-marriage. And, you know, you really need to have your own convictions are what will carry you through, because marriage isn't easy and neither is divorce. Neither is singlehood. You know, your own convictions are what will keep you. You know what I mean? So I'm not going to give you accommodation in my house just because you got divorced because you read my book. You know what I mean? I'm not going to. So you better have your game plan and you better have your sense of self and strength. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that's just what I would like to say, that, you know, investigating things and being convinced in your own mind is something that's really powerful and that helps you stand against whatever it is that you need to withstand. Because regardless of your marital situation, there are tough situations out there that every one of us is going to face. You know, I'm just one of many people. I may have made a decision that's different from a lot of my peers, but many of my peers are divorced anyway, just not on paper.
But speaking of critical thinking, so do you think, is it something you just have? Is it something you're taught? Is it something we learn in school? Because I fully agree with everything you're saying, that I think sometimes for various reasons, maybe socialization, I don't know, people are afraid to think and think for themselves and critique things and really deeply reflect on whether it's, you know, the Bible or whatever else. Why do you think that is? And is it something that can be taught, or it's like you either have it or you don't have it?
I think it can be taught. I think for some people it may be more natural it may come more naturally than others, but it's something that definitely can be taught. And at the same time, it doesn't have anything to do with education, at the same time. You know what I mean? Because I've known non-literate women, who have made such statements that's like, whoa, she really thought, you know what I mean? I've known people with very low education levels that have analyzed the situation and said, this doesn't make sense to me because of XYZ. Religion is very powerful. I think it's very important. It's also very powerful. And it is very easy, for any religious person or for anyone in a religious context to feel like, it's God's job to think for us. You know what I mean? It's very easy. And it just really also depends on where you sit, what messages you're listening to. And it's so easy to get, carried away to the extent that you forget you have a brain. You know what I mean?
A God-given brain.
Yeah. And we're also lazy,
I agree.
It's easier to hear someone tell you something and then never go back to investigate to say, wait a minute, what scripture was that from? What was the context? What was the, I mean, I can give so many different examples of that where we just swallow things hook, line, and sinker. We never bother, to go check them out, So, yeah, I think that it definitely can be taught, you know what I mean? As, we're taught in school how to weigh the evidence, for instance, you know what I mean? But that sometimes it's just, not letting go of your common sense to say, my common sense is telling me this, and I don't want to be afraid to ask questions about it until I feel comfortable, with the answers that I'm given. Yeah.
I agree. I really do agree. And yeah, perfectly said. I have nothing else to add to that, but not just even in the context of religion and or marriage, but even you look at today's world and you're like, you really just need to exercise your common sense a little bit. Be curious,
exactly.
Have some curiosity, look into it a bit more. And
right.
Yeah,
it's right on your phone. Oftentimes the questions I get, I'm like, but you have a cell phone, you're on it all the time. Google it. You know what I mean? It's like there's so much information at our fingertips, but there's also a lot of laziness.
Yeah, there is. Yeah. I agree.
Intellectual laziness.
Correctly said. There's a lot of intellectual laziness, I find. And it applies to many, many, many things, not just kind of scripture or religion, but applies to many things.
Yeah.
I am very interested to hear that you are still pro-marriage, because I've read your book.
Absolutely.
So I know the trauma you went through. Maybe the people listening to us right now might not have, the in-depth context of your trauma, but I've read your book, so I know it was not an easy journey. And then it, ended up in divorce. But you're still hopeful enough that you're pro-marriage? I find that so interesting. I don't know if I could be that.
Interesting question. I mean, marriage itself, I think that it's a beautiful idea. It's a beautiful concept. Okay. Now, getting to a marriage where you are very happy and peaceful with one another, now that can be challenging. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think marriage to the right person can actually be blissful. I think that it should be, whether it's marriage, companionship, or whatnot, I think we're not meant to sort of be an island, some people do prefer their own company to anyone else's, but I think for anybody who is eager to be coupled up or whatnot, I think that it's a really beautiful thing. I love weddings. I find them so emotional. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And at the same time, I feel so sorry too when I see two people going down the aisle with all the hope in the world, because I know how challenging, I know the challenges they have to face, but if they have, selected someone who has the wherewithal to weather the storms, then I think that there's actually nothing better in some ways. Yes.
Okay, that makes
I'm shocked you didn't know that about me.
I know. I'm also shocked I didn't know this about you. Yeah. I should know, because I should tell you, Chichi is always like trying to talk to me about like dating and things like that. And, I'm still waiting for her to introduce me to someone. She's she's not a good friend. She has never introduced me to anyone.
Nairobi is hard.
Nairobi is hard. Yeah. This is true. But that also does give me hope, because I think the older I've grown, and then I'm surrounded by people in my networks, whether that's family, friends, whoever, who are going through marriage breakdown or divorce or separation, or even very difficult marriages, as you're saying, they're married, but like all of us know, we know things are really not good, and you almost even want to tell them, just please consider, we will not blame you for divorcing.
Like their children are even telling them, call it off.
Exactly right. And so this is the image that I have seen many, many times. Less so that of peaceful, happy, all that. And so it does make me hopeful that someone like yourself who's gone through that process can still say, no, I actually think with the right person, this thing can be blissful.
Absolutely. You know, let's talk a little bit about what I mean when I say it's such a challenging process to get there. And in my book, I talk about how there's almost like an element of luck in this. And this is what one of my sisters always says. There's an element of luck in this thing, And I'm like, I can't exactly say that she's wrong. But the thing is, if you think about it, finding the right partner, you know what I mean? You yourself, you need to be ready, right? You need to find someone who seems like they have potential or who already has the potential. But then there are lots of other factors that you have no control over. You need to hope that this person doesn't have a traumatic event that makes them totally change their personality. You know what I mean? You need to hope that there's so much that's kind of uncertain, even as intentional you try to be, in seeking out a partner and deciding who's right for you, can be extremely challenging. Then you need to do this by a certain age, especially if you want a family. You know what I mean? If you want to have children, you need to think about your biological clock. You need to ensure you find a partner who also, can give you children, right? And who wants them and can be a good parent. You need to hope that, both of you or one of you has a job to help sustain, whatever lifestyle you have. You need to, there's so many elements that go into having this thing. Yeah, good. Yes. And you need to hope that over time, you don't outgrow each other, and start having totally different interests. So it's that's why I say when I see a couple coming down the aisle, it's beautiful. It's emotional. And I say a prayer because it's oh my God, what they are up against. It's it's a lot, And so people who've been able to have all of that aligned, because some of it, we talk about it as if it's, you need to be businesslike and choose the right person. Do that, but you have no control over the future. You don't know what's going to happen. What if your partner becomes ill? It's a terminal illness, or what if your partner just has an accident, is permanently paralyzed, and you have to be the caretaker? What if they lose their job and they have a mental health crisis and become an alcoholic? Exactly.
There's so many things.
What if they're not fertile?
Yes. Well, there's that too.
What
right?
if, could be anything. Yeah. So that's the gamble you take. It's a leap of faith. It's exciting. It's beautiful. Yeah. But let no one deceive you. It's challenging.
Yeah. And what I love so much about what we're talking about right now is because I do feel we're not being honest about that.
Right.
We're just pushing women in particular, but I think both men and women, you need to get married. You need the number of times I was told that in the past. I think now they've kind of given up on me. So now I don't get too much pressure from people. I see it though being given to my younger nieces and nephews. Just get married. The push is so much about getting married, but no one is telling them this, what you're saying right now. It's beautiful, but understand, because I feel this would really prepare people well to know what they're kind of getting into.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, I don't know exactly what the panacea is. I think, even with the best of intentions and all these premarital classes and this, that, and the other, people just want to get married. You know what I mean? And then if you have a biological, you're looking at your clock and all that. And, you're supposed to have all these ducks in a row. And still, so you have to find all this by the time you're this age, before this happens or before. It's a lot.
It is. And I wonder who wrote the rules. You said we have to find those things by this age,
Well, what I mean by that is, realistically for a woman, if she wants to have children, if she wants to have them within the context of a marriage, then that's an added layer of pressure.
Yes.
And somehow you need to identify this perfect person. And yet you're not supposed to be the one to ask him out. You know what I mean? It's crazy. This is crazy what we're up against, when we think about it. You know what I mean? Yet, if you are one of the lucky ones that, finds the right person and so on and so at the right time and so on and so forth. I think there's value there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. We keep hoping.
Yeah. There's a lot of hope.
Yeah. We remain hopeful.
There's a lot of hope. Come on.
I want us to talk about children in a bit, but before that, let's talk about because you did say earlier, we're very quick to be judgmental, and I agree. Yeah. I mean, and it's not just for like people going through divorce or separation. It's we single people. Yes, exactly. Yes. Like if you're married and no children, you'll be judged. If you're single, you'll be judged. Like you're judged for just about everything and anything.
That's right.
In the context of divorce, though, I know there is, especially in our African societies, I feel that there's a lot of stigma and judgment that comes along when you're going through the process of divorce, or if you are now a divorced person.
That's right. What's
your experience been, and what would you tell people about how to maybe manage that?
Great question. Yes, as with everything else, that is going to happen. You know what I mean? And I handle it in two ways. First of all, by realizing that I'm not perfect either, and I've been judgmental about certain things that I didn't understand or hadn't experienced. And second of all, it's by having a life. I've always had a life. You know what I mean? I'm a really busy person. I'm busy doing really important things. You know what I mean? And so I don't have as much time, as one might think, to worry too much about other people's opinions. I'm also a very realistic person. And if you're realistic and you're quite knowledgeable about how things work in the world, you realize that few people actually have it better than you, even if their marital status is different from yours. You know what I mean? As I said, a lot of the people I counsel happen to be married. You know what I mean? And I'm happy to use, my experience, as both someone who's been married, someone who's no longer married, to, help inform, advice and guidance for them, just to ensure that they can remain strong couples. You know what I mean? So when you feel like you have things going on for yourself, I think that it kind of drowns out, any judgmental sort of noises. And I think when you're also confident in your own skin, so my divorce would never prevent me from doing what I want to do. You know what I mean? Even in the midst of perhaps people who may be judgmental. You know what I mean? The point is, I still add value. I'm a wonderful addition to anyone's life. That has never changed. You know what I mean?
I'm evidence that she's a wonderful addition to anyone's life.
Whether it's at work, church, home, like I'm a wonderful, friend, sister, whatnot. I'm really an asset. I'm very keenly aware of that. Divorce has not blunted my sense of that. I think when you carry that, nothing else really seems to matter. Everything becomes kind of inconsequential,
How do you get to that point, though? Because I do not believe there are many women out here who'll be saying, I'm an asset. And being a divorced person does not reduce that by any measure.
Maybe I'm just lucky because, socialization is really important.
I agree.
And in some ways, perhaps I'm lucky. And at the same time, unlucky, let me put it this way, because, I was socialized by my father. One of his colleagues, a female colleague, referred to him as the first male feminist she ever met. You know what I mean? I grew up being shaped by a man who really felt that women could do anything and be anything. I was such a women's champion. You know what I mean? And I received direct messages from my dad. So I think that building of the self-esteem is something that, even in my worst periods, and my self-esteem has been higher at in some phases of my life, it's been lower, but I've never lost that overall sense of self, and I think that's really important. We have to work on ourselves before we get into any relationship. It's really important to know how valuable you are, and that you bring a whole lot to the table. I have always believed that to myself. Anybody who ends up with me has ended up with gold. I'm such a gem.
Please, can you just,
and that's just
say
the
it
truth.
Again?
No, anybody who ends up with me has ended up with gold. I am such a gem. All you have to do is interview the people in my life. Do you understand?
Yes.
So whether it's my children, whether it's my friends, acquaintances, co-workers, that's just always been me. I just feel that I'm really special, and again, I don't look at divorce as something that happened to me. I made a choice. Do you understand? maybe it doesn't matter so much who instigated it or who, but the point was I made a choice about how I no longer wanted to live. You know what I mean? So for anyone to judge me for that or to, I'm sorry, that's your problem.
I agree. I fully agree. And I love what you're saying, because I always tell my male friends this, so I can very much relate to that idea of being shaped by a man who really, raises you up. So I have a similar relationship with my dad where, there were constant messages being given to me, even if not directly, indirectly. This man was letting me know that exactly, that I am a worthy person.
Yeah.
So you carry that with you. Yeah. And maybe it's even when you're older that you reflect back and you're like, oh, I think I'm like this because of this. But as you're growing up, you're just being reminded of your worth.
Absolutely.
As a human being,
Absolutely.
And I always tell this to my male friends, especially those who are raising girls. It's so important as a parent, mom or dad. But I guess for me, I can relate with, the father, because that's been my relationship with my dad. It's so important that you're teaching your daughters their worth, so that when they're going through all these life situations, it doesn't matter. Like, they know I'm a jewel. Like, so I feel the same way. The way you say you're gold, I'm like, I'm a jewel. Like, it doesn't matter what else is happening. It doesn't mean I don't make mistakes. It doesn't mean I'm like, I don't have imperfections. But I do know that I add value. I'm a jewel. I'm an asset. I know what I bring to this world. I know what I bring to the people I interact with. If you end up with me, like, should you be so lucky?
Amen.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, you've just ended up with an asset,
That's right. It's really important to know that, not to fake it, but to really believe it.
Exactly.
And to build yourself up towards that, if that's not what you think already, because I know that we have different life circumstances.
Yes,
you know what I mean?
Correct.
But, I'll give you some examples. I I spent part of my life growing up in Nigeria, and I saw my dad, who, he was, a university professor. And, you would have these typical marriages in a patriarchal society. A woman is trying to get up in her career. I don't know the number of women my father helped. My father supported, groomed, hired, you know what I mean? Sort of like, and a woman comes and she has her PhD. She has a job in the university. Her husband's not letting her travel for a conference. She really wants to go for this conference. It's good for her career to go present. But she would come to cry to my father. That those women would come to our house, and my father would call the husband in for a meeting and say, explain to him why this is important. And out of respect for my dad, the husband would let her go. You know what I mean? Then you find the woman later on, she becomes a professor. I saw that. So as you said, it's not necessarily direct, although, there were one or two. I think the one direct message I remember was when he was really upset about someone very close to him who was in an abusive marriage. And, my dad did everything he could to get her out of it. You can't force people out of this. It has to be a personal decision.
Exactly.
Gave her a place to live, did this, did that, and said, moved her out. My father was really frustrated. I was about 10 and he was going upstairs. My little sister and I were going up the stairs behind him. He was going up in a huff and puff, really upset. Then he turns around on the stairs, points to us and says, "The reason why I'm sending you to school is so that no man will treat you the way this person has been treated." You know what I mean? So one or two times in my life, he's made direct statements, but for the most part, it was, I saw women coming to my dad and my dad being the helper. You know what I mean? Women who, lecturers were giving them bad grades because they refused to, provide sexual favors. They would come to my dad and my dad would be the one to resolve that. You know what I mean? When in Nigeria, when women first, the first set of deputy governors, because women couldn't be governors, initially. And then somewhere in the 80s, they hired or appointed the first set of deputy governors who were watching the news. I'm a child. My father is so excited. He's like, they should have more of them. So I'm sitting there as a girl listening.
Yeah.
And to me, what it says is, oh, I can be anything.
Exactly.
My dad thinks women can be this and there should be more.
Exactly.
That could be me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
So it has its positive side and the quote unquote negative side, which I don't think is so negative, but the point is that it means that you begin to think for yourself and think quite a bit of yourself.
Yeah.
And that means that you're not necessarily ready to settle for a mediocre life.
Not a
you know
bad
what
thing.
I mean? Yeah.
Not a
Now,
bad
an outsider looking in may look at it as something negative.
Yes,
you know what
true.
I mean? Because, what it means is that you begin to question things that everybody else around you seems to be satisfied with.
Yes.
And then you begin to sort of be the oddball, but if that matters so much to you, make the decision, that aligns with that. It didn't matter enough to me.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess you are right that it can be kind of lonely and isolating, but I feel the pros outweigh the cons.
I do too.
I really do.
I do too. But just to be honest about the fact that had I not had the kind of socialization I had, I probably still would have been married to the person that I married because I was not being physically abused. You know what I mean? I can't give you anything overly dramatic, you know what I mean, that a typical Nigerian woman would not bear with, you know what I mean, and that her family would not tell her to bear with, you know what I mean? So it's a very personal decision, which you don't make carelessly and without a lot of thought. Yeah.
Was your dad still around when you got divorced?
Unfortunately, my dad was not. Okay. Yeah, unfortunately, he was not. But, he saw the holes in the marriage. And I learned later, a sister of mine was telling me that, he did see the holes and, he thought, oh, my daughter, you know what I mean? But, I know he knows that I'm very okay. Yeah.
I'm sure he does.
Yeah, he ensured I was okay before he left.
Oh, good. Yeah. Good. We love that for you. Yeah. I want us to talk about children or motherhood, because so you'd planned this life when you were in your 20s or whenever, you're going to raise your children with a partner, and then circumstances turn out such that you find yourself a single mom.
Yes.
And I know children is one big reason why women do not leave bad situations and bad marriages. So what's that been like for you? And I should tell the people listening that the daughter who was 1 and just barely walking when you divorced has now recently joined university. So yay.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
So what has that journey been like of you suddenly find yourself in, okay, not suddenly, but you know what I mean? You're now a single mother, but this is not something that you had anticipated for your life.
Yeah, that is probably the most challenging part. I think it's so much easier if there are no children involved, This is how I got through that bit, again, by being analytical. You know what I mean? I try to, sometimes you need to put emotions aside and you need to weigh the evidence. Being a researcher helps too. Let me say that, right? You need to really weigh the evidence, and the anecdotal evidence and the observational evidence, just by looking at, just by interacting with people, having people in my lives, who were couples, who were families with children and so on and so forth. As wonderful as marriage is, it's not marriage itself that ensures your children are going to be okay. It is marriage without turbulence.
That is so powerful.
It's better for a child to be in a marriage or to be, raised, in any kind of different way, right? As long as it's a peaceful, predictable, healthy situation. So where we miss it is thinking that, it's just any kind of marriage. As long as we're married, even if we're living on separate floors, we're not talking to each other, we're fighting. And somehow it's like, this is what pleases God and this is what God doesn't hate. Somehow in our minds, we're able to accept that. You know what I mean? To me, that makes absolutely no sense, but it doesn't matter what I think. What the evidence shows is that it's not just any kind of marriage. That's what people miss. Again, being intellectually lazy and not really sifting through, the evidence to understand. It's not marriage in itself that's protective. You know what I mean? But it's a good marriage, right? Or a marriage where there's no obvious turbulence. You know what I mean? And so for me, that made things really comfortable for me. And just, observing children growing up in 2-parent homes. I love two-parent families and so on and so forth. And observing all the challenges that children still went through, regardless of having both parents under the same roof. Tell yourself the truth. That's one thing I keep saying in my book. I told myself the truth about these different situations. Do you understand? Put your emotions aside and ask yourself, do you know any children in 2-parent families who are on drugs? Do you know any children in 2-parent families who ended up getting pregnant early. Do you know any children in two-parent families who are addicted to either gambling or who parents have to go bail out of jail or who... Do you? Yes or no?
And the
you know
answer
what I
is
mean?
yes,
And the
yeah.
answer is yes.
Yeah.
So what is the difference? That's what we need to figure out. You know what I mean? So again, I'm not advocating for one thing over the other, but I'm saying no matter what your situation is, you can be the best parent that you can be. You know what I mean? You can be the best parent you can be, and your children, will recognize that you're doing everything you can to ensure that they are okay, and they will reward you accordingly. So that's what really helped me get over that hump as well. Also, what also helped was the fact that the reality was I was in a situation where I was alone.
A lot of the
90% of the time.
Yes.
So in my adult mind, it was sort of like, what's the difference? You know what I mean? Now, it did make a difference to my first child, who knew what it was like in the first 5 years, 6 years of his life. He knew what it was like to grow up with two parents in the home, a mom and a dad, right? My last born had no idea because by the time we were separated, she was 1. So I have 2 children who have processed this, who processed it really differently. You know what I mean? And my son had a challenging year in his teenage phase, because this happened when he was around 13. I mean, that 13 to 16-year-old time frame can be challenging regardless. That's adolescence. You know what I mean? And so he had a challenging time because the separation happened when he was like 13. Wait a minute. Am I getting that right? Sorry. The separation happened when he was around 8, and then the divorce happened when he was like 12, 13, something like that. So, and what I didn't know for him was that the separation, that's okay. But the divorce was too final for him. And
no hope of reconciliation.
Yeah. And so he had a challenging year. You know what I mean? But the truth is that in two-parent families, children going through adolescence, they have challenging phases, because that's just what adolescence is. So tell yourself the truth. If it hadn't been my divorce, it would have been something else. You know what I mean? And when I say a challenging phase, it was not anything crazy. You know what I mean? But it was, I can't deny that there was a challenging phase there. And I can't deny that, for my daughter who, essentially grew up without her dad, she has her own, issues as well with processing what it meant, not to have ever had, her experience was totally different. You know what I mean? Because, by the time she came along, her dad was really never there, so her questions are very different and what she has to process is very different, but it would, you have to deal with challenges anyway. And if you're trying to get married or remaining in a marriage, just because you think that that's what will make your kids be okay, then you're wrong, because kids know much more than you think.
That's the thing.
The unspoken things, kids see a lot, they sense a lot. I
agree.
So you might as well just live your truth. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I will say, because, my kids now are ages 26 and 18, my children are fine. I've had a chance to see that child who was, almost 6 when we moved to Kenya. I've had a chance to see him come out of, adolescence and negotiate his own relationship, with his dad and come at it with understanding, that, okay, so this is what was going on. Oh, I see. Oh, all right. And have compassion where it's due. And, this, that, and I mean, they figure it out. These are intelligent children that we've invested a lot in, you know what I mean? And, my daughter's just 18. But, and she's, beginning her own process of, thinking through, what has this meant? Why did this happen? And what should this mean now? As I continue to grow and become more and more independent,
If there is a woman out there who's kind of going through, as we're saying, teenagehood is teenagehood, and there'll be challenges anyway.
That's
but
right.
Say there's a woman out there, or a man for that matter, who's raising children in a situation of divorce, and they're going through some challenges with their children, which they partially or fully attribute to the divorce. What advice would you be giving to them? Like, how did you manage your own challenges? Is it you seek independent help? Is it you talk to the children? You're honest with them? What does managing those challenging situations with the children look like?
That and everything above, do everything as any mother or father would, right? Who adores their children. You leave no stone unturned. when it comes to getting them the help they need. Don't be, I was going to be a Nigerian now and say, don't be a bushwoman in the village. Do you understand? There are resources all over the place. You know what I mean? This is Nairobi. There are resources, psychosocial support, all kinds of things. There are children, counselors, child counselors, child psychiatrists. There are, do whatever you can where there are free services. Let money not be a barrier. There are friends who do better than counselors. You know what I mean? There are people that your children may be able to open up to. Don't be hurt if they can't open up to you on a particular issue. Don't be proud. Don't be, just leave no stone unturned, whatever it is that's needed.
And I like what you just said. Yeah, don't be, if they can't open up to you, don't take it personally.
Not at all. Don't do that.
Yes, find the help that they need and don't kind of personalize it and, be proud about it. And
Absolutely. Use every resource that you can because, we'll die for it. I mean, I always say that's the only unconditional love I've ever experienced is my love for my children. I don't have that for anybody else, where it doesn't matter what you have done. I will always love you. I don't have that kind of love for anybody else. I've never experienced it. You know what I mean? So you leave no stone unturned while not beating yourself up. You give yourself grace too.
That's important.
You know what I mean? Because these things happen. And the truth is, honestly, talk to anybody around you. If you're really truthful to yourself, if it hadn't been, maybe they're acting up because they miss the other parent, they would act up because of someone else. I grew up with two parents. They lived together. They were married till they died. It wasn't a perfect marriage by any means, but I grew up in a 2-parent family. If they say raise your hand, I'm one of them. I know the challenges my parents had. I know how, I know the kind of complicated relationship I had with my mother. She was married though. You know what I mean? I know the kind of, I just buried my mother this year in June. I know the kind of complicated relationship we had. And this was a married couple for decades. You know what I mean? So let's just tell ourselves the truth. You know what I mean? Yeah.
I like that. And even if someone is outside of Nairobi, nowadays there's a lot of kind of virtual counseling. There is
virtual, friends,
as you were saying.
So there's free virtual services.
Yes, free
some
services.
Of them you have to pay for.
Exactly.
Friends, in churches.
I was about to say in churches, you might be able to find some support as well.
That sort of thing.
Yeah. So the resources are unlimited. It's just about being proactive in finding the help.
That's right. And finding, anything that you can that you think will be helpful, do your research on it. You know what I mean? And figure it out. You know what I mean? There are all kinds of things. I may not necessarily list them, but, even holistic medicine, sometimes, diet, those kinds of things. Do whatever you can. I have left no stone unturned, when it comes to my children. And I have no regrets.
And you've been a great mom.
Oh, thank you.
You really, really, I have seen you with your kids and I'm just like, you have done the most. You're a great mom. Yeah.
Thank you. They are among my greatest work.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are. And they're good kids. They're really respectful, really confident. You've done a really good job. Yeah, you have. I do want us to talk about dating. Post-divorce or as a single mother, because as you're saying, some people might be worried about loneliness and what will life look like after divorce and will I be lovable again? Will anyone want me with now 2 children? And, all these sorts of things. What was that like for you? And, what would you tell anyone out there who's kind of worrying about these kinds of questions?
Will anyone want you after 2 children? The answer is yes.
I think so. Even more than 2 children. Yeah.
Start by wanting yourself.
That is so important.
Start by wanting yourself. And you'll begin to attract what you need to attract if you need to. You know what I mean? And some people are okay with after divorce and sort of like, I would never want to go into that again. Other people beg to differ. They want a companion or they want marriage again, so on and so forth. But I will say that there definitely is life after divorce. I feel like we should look at it as an adventure, because what's the alternative? You know what I mean? What's the alternative? Why not take this new lease on life that you have and see what you can make of it and see what you would do differently now that you have this chance. And for those who may be, looking for partners, companionship or whatnot, you need to have a network, and you need to somewhat get out of your house. I say this as someone who is a real homebody. It's hard to pull me out of my house, but I'm just saying the truth is, let's just be realistic. You know what I mean? You do need to meet people. It doesn't happen sort of magically. But I wouldn't want that to be uppermost in people's minds. I think that once we ourselves have done the work and the healing that we need to do, then anything is really possible. I don't see it as too late for anything. Including companionship.
I agree. And I really love what you said, the first thing of want yourself first. Because I think so many people, like, you're kind of rushing to be wanted by others, but it's like,
so dangerous.
It is, because then you're looking for external validation from others. So want yourself first.
That's right.
And then, look at it as an adventure, and be open. I know a number of people who, like, their second marriage has been really wonderful, or they've met love again much later on in life, and it's been really wonderful. So I think the possibilities are endless,
I do think so. And it's also a chance to be in a relationship with this new version of yourself, not making the same mistake. Because now what I did, I shouldn't have done XYZ. If I'd known, I would have, you know what I mean? And now you have this chance to, exercise your new self, your new regulations around yourself. You're older. You're not willing to just accept anything just for the sake of a ring on your finger or whatnot. You know what I mean? So there's something positive about that.
I agree. Yeah, definitely. I want us to wrap up by talking about healing. And as we do, I want to read from your book again, because really, this is just like shameless promotion of your book, but that's because I love it. I think it's such a good book. So I have not been paid any money to promote this book. I just really think it's such a good book. And I should actually say, I have gifted this book, as you know, to a couple of people in my network who are going through a process of divorce, and they have found it to be, like, really useful for them as well. But in your book, as you're talking about healing, I'll read two passages, because I just love them. And I especially love how in one of them, how you describe healing. So you said you were talking about grief, right? And then, and maybe that's something. Before actually I do read this passage, Chichi, tell me how you dealt with the grief of your marriage ending. Because I think regardless, there is a lot of grief there.
Absolutely, there really is. And I definitely had tons. I talk about a 4-month period when I couldn't do any work, even though I was going to work. It was saddening. It was a deep, thick, heavy cloud of grief that I thought I would never overcome. And the simplest way I can describe how I came out of it, because I didn't do anything strategic, was putting one foot in front of the other each day. Just being there in my life.
Just keep moving.
I'm getting through Monday. Okay. We've gotten to Wednesday. It's okay. I don't know when it was. Maybe after about a 2-year period, I felt the cloud started parting. And I was like, oh, I see the sun. You know what I mean? It was a gradual feeling of that cloud lifting, just because I chose to live and just to keep on. Writing my book was also a huge tool for processing the grief. It was very healing. I advocate for therapy.
As do I.
In my own days, I don't know why it never occurred to me to see a therapist. I don't know why. I badly needed it, but it just never occurred to me. What I thought I needed was a support group, because I know I needed to talk about this to someone. And people in your life get fed up of hearing about what you're going through, and you can see it in their eyes that, listen, we're so done with you. You know what I mean? So I needed a group of people who'd been through the same thing and who weren't done processing. And I searched and searched for a support group for divorcees or people going through divorce in Nairobi. And at the time, there was none. There was one that sort of attempted to start, and I did meet up with a lady who was trying to start it, but it never actually took off. So we met, but the meeting never actually happened. But at least I gained a new person in my life. And then after I was done writing the book, there was then another one that was sort of more publicized that came to the fore. I was like, oh, too bad. When I really needed it, it wasn't there. So I don't know why I never thought about therapy. If I were going through it again, I would have got myself a good therapist, paid them to talk and help guide me as I air out my feelings. So this book is this was my therapy.
I was about to say this was your therapy.
Was my therapy, in addition to just doing the same thing over and over again mechanically. Get up and do what you normally do each day. And one day, time is just a healer. It just is. One day, without you even knowing how or why, you'll realize that, oh, wow, I don't feel as heavy. It doesn't look as dark. There's a glimmer of light. Oh, there's full sunshine. It just happens, over time, as with any other wound,
I really like that for two reasons, because I think when people see you now, talking about this, and of course, it's a long time ago and you've gone through the healing process, they might not understand that you went through such deep grief.
That's right.
Because it was never a light decision.
Right.
And you were grieving the loss of something that was very important to you. So
absolutely. And something I had waited for forever. You know what I mean? You know how many people I turned down? Do you know how many, I asked my sister the other day, how many boyfriends do you think I had? You know how many boyfriends I had when we were growing up? She was like, maybe about 3. I'm like, yeah, you're right. And I was like, do you realize that they were very short-lived? I was like, you know why? Because I was putting on my life for marriage. I thought that marriage was the ultimate. You know what I mean? It was so important, I was like, he's not going to marry me. So my relationships were like 3-4 months long. I did have one boyfriend for 2 years. That was from ages 17 to 19. That was like my first boyfriend. But even him, I was like, he's not going to marry me. I broke up with him. You know what I mean? Then the next 2 were like 3 or 4 months long. And I was like, I'm waiting for the person that's actually going to marry me. These guys want to sleep with me and then move on. No, it's just going to be my husband, and God is going to bless me, and it's going to be blissful because I've waited, and because, this is why I'm saying, the naivete, and not to say there's value. I still value those things. I'm also a realist. And I'm saying sometimes, despite your best efforts, and that's why on the blog I started, which became a book, it's now defunct, but it's up there. The tagline is, happens to the best of us. Sometimes you do everything right, quote unquote, and you're still faced with, this sort of a situation. A pastor that I used to talk to, one of the things he said is that, he's realized that quote unquote good girls, and I have a chapter in the book called Nice Girls Finish Last. It's sort of being sarcastic. But he says, what he's noticed that good girls, quote unquote, who were raised in quote unquote good families, oftentimes they end up in bad marriages because their father was their model and they assumed every man was like that. Do you understand? Every man would be like that. They assumed, this is a man. This is the man I know. You're the first man you love, right? And they just assume everyone knows how to be a man. And so they're not very good at vetting. Yeah. You know what I mean? And they've also been very protected. And I was extremely sheltered.
Yes.
It was like ridiculous. Mine was extreme. And so they don't quite have the street smarts to sniff out, what who they should be with and who they should not. And he's so spot on, about that. I'm going off on a tangent. I don't remember why I said that, but I'm sure it's good for somebody.
It will help someone out there.
Yeah.
It will definitely help someone out there. But as you were speaking, another question came to mind for me was, at any point, were you mad at God? Because as you're saying, you did everything right. You waited, you did the marriage, like you were a good girl, and then it still didn't work out.
Yeah.
Was there a point where you felt angry at God?
Yeah, I did a lot of things right. Let me see. No, it's the fact that I'm even hesitating, No, I can't say there was a lot of emotion, but I wouldn't say there was anger. There was confusion. There were a lot of questions. But through it all, I never felt that I was not loved, by God, or I was not. It was very confusing, very, very unsettling. But I wouldn't say that there was actual anger. I still felt very blessed. And I think that's one thing I'm good at is counting my blessings. I still felt very blessed. I felt blessed that it was not a contentious or contended divorce. When the divorce is contended, it's long and drawn out, it's expensive. We didn't have much in terms of property or whatnot, assets to fight over, you know what I mean? I got full custody of my children. I didn't have to watch my children go to some other house for the weekend or for the summer or for the, I had the privilege of raising my children, seeing my children every day. You know what I mean? I had have wonderful support around me, both from the church, from friends, from family. I had a job. I had there were so many blessings. You know what I mean? That I could not. I think it would have been foolhardy of me. That's the way I felt, to not be grateful to God, for all the ways in which He kept me. You know what I mean? You would never know. I mean, you would never guess if I didn't tell you I was divorced. Yeah. You know what I mean? You would never know. Whatever you think divorce means, you know what I mean? You would never guess that I am divorced. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, no, I didn't feel anger. Okay. And I took whatever I felt to Him.
I like that. Yeah. You took whatever you felt to Him.
Good, bad, ugly.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it could go the other way. Yeah. You could have, yeah. But then I think you also, I've known you for a little while now, and I think you're generally an optimistic person.
I would say so.
Yeah. I don't think, I feel like I would go to the other direction.
Glass half full.
Yeah.
Glass
I think it definitely is counting your blessings, being optimistic, even in all the chaos and confusion, reminding yourself of how many good things are still kind of working out for you. Yeah. So, yeah. And it doesn't mean that you're still not feeling the grief or the dark cloud or all of that stuff, but just looking for, the blessings even in all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to read the passage around healing. And so as I said, the first passage I'll read, you were talking about grief, and then you go on to say, but feeling a pang or two now and then of grief is part of the healing process, I think. A sign of some serious progress even. It's a pang now and then, as opposed to the full-blown waves I used to experience. And you've talked about that, the full-blown waves you used to experience. Sort of like when a scab begins to form over an open wound. The tightness of the scab causes twinges of pain initially, but the pain is no less a sign that some major healing processes have occurred and that the end is in sight. The scab will eventually give way to nature, loosen up, and then disappear. There might always be reminders of the wound, though. Just like an indelible mark from a wound that has healed will always serve as a reminder. So that's the first bit you say. I'll read the second bit and then I'll let you comment. And then you go on to say, I look back now and I am proud of the 20-something-year-old me who, ignorant and naive as she was, dared to dream and enter into marriage with all her heart. I am proud of the 30-something-year-old me who found the courage to face some hard truths about her life and to make a distinction between a dream and a nightmare. I am proud of the lessons I have gleaned. The 40-something-year-old me, older, wiser, and more alive now than I have ever been in my adult life. What do you have to say about that?
This book was written 2012, most of it. And then I finished it up in 2013. And so this is a long time ago. I have not really gone back to read it. So thank you. It's beautiful to hear. And I just wanted to say, as you're reading, I'm proud of the 53-year-old me. Yeah. I mean, I think my life has been beautiful. You know what I mean? Is there any life that hasn't had a speed bump or you know what I mean? I really think I've had a beautiful life. I think that out of my divorce has come a whole lot, that is useful for the world around me. I have not had time to focus. When this book first came out, I would give talks. I would, do TV interviews, this, that, and the other. And sort of it was overtaken by, just being really busy and maybe not being able to multitask enough, and maybe also being a bit camera shy and not sure of how far I wanted to push things. I'm glad it's out there as a resource, but I know that the work that led to this is not done. You know what I mean? And there's a lot more to be done, with the rest of my life, when it comes to, letting women and men, because, men have written to me too, to say, I'm going through this, I've just gotten divorced. I'm about to, I've read your book. There's still a lot to be done. You know what I mean? So as for your reflection on that, yes, I think that's a good description of, your reading of that. That's a good description of healing and how it happened for me. I've had other losses as well. My parents are no longer with us. I've also lost my beloved younger sister, all those things. But, in some way, it is like that. It's a terrible wound, then it's a scab, and then it heals, and then it falls off, and then there's the mark, and, so I'm fine with all of that. And I would say, whether you feel pangs of grief here and there, when you do feel those things, I think it just shows that you really lived, you really loved, you really dared, correct. You really, you know what I mean? You don't want to be a passerby in this life. You have to take a leap of faith for certain things. Many of them will work out, some might not, but it's better than just watching life, pass you by. You have to try something and give it your all, learn from it, do better, the next time or in your next phase. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I guess those are my reflections on those two passages.
Yes. On grief and healing. And I think it's really important so that anyone out there who's listening or, watching us today and right now is in the throes of the wound, the raw wound with all the grief that it comes with, understand that at some point it'll become a scab and then the scab will fall off. And yes, the scar, the mark might always be there, but it won't always be that kind of raw, deep wound,
Yeah, it gets better.
It gets better. So hang in there,
That's right.
Yeah.
And I can just tell you mentioned my daughter going off to college. I mean, her dad and I took her to college. You know what I mean? Like I said, these are two people who were young and had the best of intentions, and who didn't have a crystal ball to know the kinds of pressures that would come in life and the challenges and there's just so much, there's the financial, there's the personality, there's the, all these kinds of issues you're trying to fight. And two people who innocently thought that being Christians was enough. And it was important, but it wasn't enough, one of the two just decided it wasn't enough for her, that's all that it was. So despite all the, all that's, what did they say? The water that's gone under the bridge,
yeah.
Here we have, this, young lady who's going off and starting off on her own, you know what I mean? And, it was great that we were able to take her there and get her set up and, that sort of thing. Yeah. So such is life.
Yeah. Would you do anything different if you went back to being 20? Well, you have talked about when you were going through the divorce, you would have done therapy. That's one thing.
Yeah, that's one thing. But going back to being 20, I wish I'd been a bit more street smart. But how do you change that? You know what I mean? I don't know how you change it, because even till today, I don't think I'm street smart enough, But I always say, though, the reason why it's a no, and it easily could have been a yes. I could easily say, oh, take me back to when I was 26 and when I got married, and have me make a different choice, not a better one, because I'm probably better for someone else, and so is he. If I hadn't gone through this path, I wouldn't have the children that I have. And the 2 children that I have, I always believe they were created for me. I'm the best mother for these 2 children in all their delightfulness and weirdness, and whatever it is.
Yes.
Children can be quite complex. I am really the best mother, for these 2 kids. I don't know what children I would have had, if I had not been with their father. So it's difficult for me to say I regret that, because these are the children that were designed for my heart. I know how to attend to them. You know what I mean? With all their shenanigans, all their successes, it's really, I feel like they're just mine. They were meant to be. So, if that was the reason, why we had to meet, then, so be it. It's worth it. Yeah.
So be it. And what would you say as like your parting shot to a woman out there who might be going through the process of divorce and or separation right now? They're like in the throes of it. They can't even, they're still in that grief, that cloud, that confusion, that chaos. What's the one thing you could tell them to maybe like encourage them or,
I may not have anything earth-shattering to say, but I will say that it's going to be okay. And I know that it sounds trite, at this time, but that is true, that with the passage of time, everything, I've always had this mantra, everything looks better in the morning. You know what I mean? Sometimes morning takes a while to come, you know what I mean? But, keep pushing through. And someday you'll wake up and realize that, oh, wow, I actually made it across this huge hump that I thought was just insurmountable. Secondly, I would say, get my book.
Yes.
It's a shameless plug. And I say that because I have given away more books than I've sold.
I know. I have told you about that.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
So when I say get my book, I don't even mean, figure out how to get the money. You know what I mean? I only have 6 copies left.
Do you?
Yes. And I'm sort of trying to hold on to them because I'm like, oh my God. I need to make arrangements to get more copies. I only have 6 copies left, but it's available on Amazon.com.
Yes.
You can get the Kindle version, which is very cheap, which means you won't have a hard copy, but at least you can read it. I say get my book because one of the things that got me through as well was reading 2 books. I was frantically, like I said, looking for something to connect to. I thought it would be a support group. People and talking to people. I was looking for books I could read about women who had been through divorce. I have 2 of them. These 2 were written by white American women. I couldn't find anything by an African woman like me. I couldn't find. I was like, these are wonderful books. I read them cover to cover over and over again, just to give myself hope. And I think it helped that they were very positive. These women had positive, they put a positive spin on their divorces. You know what I mean? So that really helped me from the beginning to shape my thinking. Like, it doesn't have to be a negative thing. But I noticed that huge gap that there were no voices like mine. I need an African woman that can tell me what it's like to tell her mother, whom she already has a complicated relationship with, that she's getting divorced. And this is a Nigerian mother in Nigerian society who needs to explain to people what's really happening in her home. You know what I mean? I need someone who can tell me what it's like to break this news to the church and to still come to church. You know what I mean? Those kinds of things were missing. As wonderful as those books are, I needed someone who was within my context and who culturally could understand what divorce means, on this side of the world, and this book is that. So I would say surround yourself by resources. This is one resource. Yeah. I might be able to give a couple for free.
Yeah. I hear you. And really, I have read, I keep recommending this book because yes, I fully agree with everything you've said and other resources out there. But
absolutely,
this one I know and I trust because I've read it. Not even just because you're my friend, because I've read it and I know what a valuable resource is it. And so if anyone wants to get in touch with you, Chichi, or wants to, so we've said you can get the book on Amazon or, the Kindle version.
Right.
But if like someone wants to like engage with you or they're in the throes of things and they're just like, I just want to have a chat with this person, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
My pseudonym under which I wrote the book.
Actually, we should have told people that you wrote the book under a pseudonym.
I wrote it under a pseudonym, Nena Ndioma.
Yeah.
And so you can either find me by sending me a message on Facebook Messenger, which is at Nena Ndioma, and I'm sure you'll have it up on your screen. Or you can email me at nenandioma@gmail.com.
Yeah.
Messenger is quicker because I'll get it right away on my phone.
Okay.
But either way, I'll eventually check.
Okay. And we will definitely make sure we have those details within the podcast description, because I have no doubt that this conversation will be so helpful to many African women in particular out there who are struggling, either struggling in marriage or thinking about leaving a bad situation, are already separated and divorced, are in the throes of things, or those who are even thinking of getting into marriage, just to be aware of the potential challenges to come. So I know this conversation will be very, very useful to very, very many people out there, particularly African women. And so that's why I'm like, I want to make sure we have some of your details in the podcast description, because you'd be the best person to speak to people who reach out to us about this topic. So yeah.
Thank you for giving me a platform to talk about it. Thank you.
My God. No, thank you for your time, your honesty. As always, I expected nothing less from you. I know you're kind of an honest, open person. Thank you for the vulnerability you've shown here, for the courage to even not just come on this platform, but to even have written this book. Because I know so many people who have gone through divorce, but they can't even speak about it. It still feels so kind of shameful or like a failure. Actually, I think there's also a lot of people who think it's like they failed at something.
Right.
And so I feel that this is something that's very kind of validating to, it revalidates that you this thing didn't make you a failure or didn't make you any less worthy or does not make you a bad human being or it's just life,
I mean, it's called a failed marriage, right?
Exactly. Even so the language that we use
are very
for
powerful.
it. Yeah.
And it's really up to us to frame, what failure is.
Yeah.
And if it's a failed marriage just because you didn't stay in it, then I don't really know what to do with that. There are a lot of failed marriages that are together.
100%. I love that. There are a lot of failed marriages that are still together. Yeah. 100%. So yes, I agree. So thank you so much for your time, for your honesty, for everything you did. You said something here, and I want to finish with this. Because as you said in your book, you keep reiterating, tell yourself the truth, tell yourself the truth. And one thing you said when we were starting, and I wrote it down because I wanted to remember to come back to it, is, am I really being a good steward of my life? Like, you need to ask yourself, whoever is out there listening to us, watching us, are you really being a good steward of your life? Are you asking yourself the hard questions that you need to ask yourself? Are you telling yourself the truth about your situation? And the choices you make might be very different to the choices that Chichi made or that I would make, but it's important that they are choices that are kind of based on being honest with yourself and telling yourself the truth and being a good steward of your life and taking, in some ways almost taking stock or auditing your life and being like, okay, based on this audit that I've done, these are the decisions that I need to make in my best interest, right? So I want to thank you all who are listening in today for taking the time to come and share space with us today. This for me has been, I always love talking to Chichi anyway. And I remember when we were talking about this, I said to her, we'll be doing our usual gisting, but now we'll just focus on one topic. We wouldn't, I will go to her house and we'll talk for hours and hours. So, today in the interest of time, we needed to focus on one topic, but I hope that anyone out there who's listening to us, who is watching us on YouTube, I hope you found this conversation useful. And if you did find it useful, if it resonated with you, if there was any element of it that moved you, please feel free to share it with someone else who you think might benefit, whether it's a friend, a family member, anyone in your network for whom this might be useful. You can also continue to engage with us and journey with us by following Conversations with Kũi from wherever you get your podcasts from, whether that's Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And you can also engage with us on any of our social media platforms, which are all listed in the podcast description. And as I said before, we'll make sure we put links to the book and how to access the book, and also links on how one can engage with Chichi, who uses the pseudonym Nena Ndioma for the purposes of this conversation. We'll make sure we have all that information listed in the podcast description. Until next time, dear listener, stay well, and may we all find courage in vulnerability and freedom in living our truths.